The winter of 1692 descended upon Salem Village, Massachusetts, a stark and unforgiving season that mirrored the rigid piety of its Puritan inhabitants. In this isolated community, God's wrath was a constant fear, and the devil's work was believed to lurk in every shadow. The harsh Puritan dogma instilled a deep-seated paranoia, where misfortunes were often attributed to unseen spiritual battles. At the heart of Salem Village lived Reverend Samuel Parris, a man whose rigid faith and strained relationship with his congregation set an uneasy tone. His household, composed of his young daughter Betty, niece Abigail Williams, and his enslaved woman Tituba, would soon become the epicenter of an unimaginable horror. The bitter cold of January 1692 brought with it an unsettling malaise, as 10-year-old Betty Parris began exhibiting alarming and inexplicable symptoms. She would fall into violent fits, contorting her body into grotesque shapes, uttering strange guttural sounds, and complaining of invisible tormentors pinching and biting her. Soon, 17-year-old Abigail Williams, also living in the Parris household, began to display similar terrifying afflictions, plunging the family into deep despair and confusion. Physicians were called, but their learned diagnoses offered no natural explanation for the girls' horrific symptoms, leading them to suggest a more sinister cause. The consensus among the Puritan doctors was grim. Only witchcraft could account for such unnatural torments. This pronouncement from figures of authority sealed the fate of many, turning an inexplicable illness into a terrifying spiritual battle within the community. Reverend Parris, desperate for answers, questioned his enslaved woman Tituba, a woman of Caribbean descent who often shared tales of voodoo and spiritual practices. These stories, though perhaps innocent entertainment, now seemed to offer a terrifying explanation for the girl's torments. In a society deeply suspicious of anything outside strict Puritan doctrine, Tituba's cultural background made her an easy target for growing anxieties. Tituba, under immense pressure and fearing for her own life, concocted a witch cake at the behest of Parris's neighbor, Mary Sibley, a folk remedy believed to reveal the witch's identity. This act, though meant to help, inadvertently cemented the belief in witchcraft within the Parris household and the wider community. It was a desperate attempt to combat an invisible evil, but it only served to validate the escalating paranoia. The girls' afflictions continued to worsen, and under intense questioning, they were coerced to name their tormentors. The weight of their torment, coupled with the community's desperate need for an explanation, made them vulnerable to suggestion. Their accusations, once spoken, would echo through Salem like a death knell, irreversible and devastating. The first three women accused were Tituba herself, along with Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, three marginalized figures who were already outliers in the rigid Puritan society. Sarah Good was a homeless beggar, known for her smoking habit and defiant demeanor, making her an easy target for societal scorn. Sarah Osborne, an elderly, sickly woman, was unpopular due to an inheritance dispute and her failure to attend church, further isolating her from the community's graces. On March 1, 1692, the initial examinations began before magistrates Jonathan Corwin and John Hathorne, signaling the ominous start of the legal proceedings. The atmosphere was charged with fear, as the afflicted girls dramatically reacted to the presence of the accused, cementing the community's belief in their guilt. These examinations, far from objective inquiries, were theatrical spectacles designed to extract confessions and validate the girls' claims, further entrenching the town's descent into madness. Sarah Good maintained her innocence with a defiant spirit, often muttering curses under her breath, which further solidified the villagers' suspicions. Her poverty and unkempt appearance made her an easy scapegoat, and her refusal to conform to Puritan expectations was twisted into evidence of malevolence. The deep-seated prejudice against her meant that any display of anger or despair was immediately interpreted as a sign of her wickedness. Sarah Osborne, frail and ill, repeatedly denied any involvement with witchcraft, her weak voice barely audible above the clamor of the afflicted girls. Her inability to defend herself forcefully was perceived as an admission of guilt, and her sickness was twisted as a consequence of her supposed dark dealings. She quickly succumbed to her harsh prison conditions, dying before her trial could even conclude, a tragic testament to the inhumanity of the proceedings. Tituba, facing intense interrogation and likely severe threats, eventually broke down and confessed to being a witch, painting a terrifying picture of the devil's dark pact. Her confession, vivid and dramatic, described black dogs, red cats, and a tall, dark man who demanded her allegiance. This harrowing narrative not only saved her from immediate execution, but also legitimized the entire witch hunt, giving horrifying credence to the girl's claims and validating the fears of the community. Her confession also named Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne as fellow conspirators, effectively sealing their fates and shifting the focus from individual affliction to a widespread satanic conspiracy. The naming of others gave the impression of a growing coven, stoking greater panic and legitimizing the girl's accusations as part of a larger, more terrifying plot. This act of self-preservation, however coerced, became a catalyst for the escalating hysteria, turning neighbor against neighbor. The dramatic confessions and accusations unleashed a wave of terror throughout Salem and the surrounding towns. Fear spread like wildfire as people began to suspect their friends, family, and even respected community members. This pervasive paranoia twisted the bonds of trust, transforming once peaceful neighborhoods into breeding grounds for suspicion and betrayal. The afflicted girls, now seen as divinely chosen instruments against the devil, gained immense power and influence. Their dramatic fits and accusations became the primary form of evidence in the ensuing trials. This unprecedented authority given to young women, typically voiceless in Puritan society, proved to be a dangerous catalyst, allowing their theatrical performances to dictate life and death. By the end of March, 3 more women were accused: Martha Corey, Rebecca Nurse, and Bridget Bishop, all vastly different from the initial marginalized targets. Martha Corey, a respected member of the church, was initially skeptical of the accusations, questioning the girls' credibility, which immediately drew their attention and wrath. Her intellectual independence and doubt in the unfolding drama made her a dangerous anomaly in a town eager to believe in a pervasive evil, thus turning suspicion upon herself. Rebecca Nurse, a 71-year-old matriarch, was a deeply pious woman of impeccable reputation, whose accusations shocked the entire community. Her family and numerous neighbors rallied to her defense, testifying to her virtuous character and Christian faith. Yet, despite overwhelming support, the spectral claims of the afflicted girls held more sway, demonstrating the irrational grip the hysteria had on the legal process, rendering logic and testimony utterly powerless. Bridget Bishop, on the other hand, was a notoriously independent and outspoken woman, known for her colorful attire and multiple marriages, a stark contrast to puritanical norms. Her nonconformity and perceived loose morals made her an easy target, someone the villagers were already inclined to distrust. Bishop's defiant spirit and unconventional lifestyle made her a perfect scapegoat for the community's anxieties, enabling the accusations against her to gain quick traction. The examinations of these new accused individuals brought the theatrical display of the afflicted girls to a terrifying peak. They would scream, fall into fits, and claim to be tormented by the spectral forms of the accused, often mimicking the movements of the person on trial. This public performance, interpreted as irrefutable proof of witchcraft, further manipulated the magistrates and terrified the onlookers, ensuring that rationality and justice were utterly lost amidst the pandemonium. A chilling aspect of the trials was the belief that witches left witches' marks on their bodies, places where the devil supposedly suckled. These marks, often moles, warts, or birthmarks, were meticulously searched for during intrusive and humiliating physical examinations. Such examinations, conducted by juries of women, became yet another tool of terror, turning natural bodily variations into damning evidence of a satanic pact, further stripping the accused of their dignity and humanity. The jail cells quickly filled with accused men and women, often elderly and infirm, subjected to unspeakable conditions. Overcrowding, lack of sanitation, inadequate food, and brutal cold took a heavy toll, with several prisoners dying before they could even face trial. The sheer physical suffering endured in these dark, damp dungeons served as a silent testament to the cruelty of the era, a horrifying prelude to the gallows for many. As the numbers of accused swelled, Governor William Phipps, newly arrived from England, was compelled to establish a special court of Oyer and Terminer to handle the burgeoning cases. This court, meaning to hear and determine, was designed to quickly process the accused, but its very structure lacked due process and was deeply flawed. Its rapid formation and the appointment of stern, unquestioning judges solidified the path towards injustice, ensuring swift, biased convictions rather than fair hearings. Chief Justice William Stoughton, a man of rigid beliefs and an unwavering conviction in the reality of witchcraft, led the court. His zealous pursuit of convictions and his dismissal of any evidence that contradicted the accusers proved disastrous for the accused. Stoughton's absolute certainty in the devil's presence, coupled with his legal authority, created an insurmountable barrier to justice, ensuring that anyone brought before his court was effectively condemned before their trial even began. The court's primary form of evidence, spectral evidence, allowed testimony based on dreams, visions, and the supposed unseen torments caused by the accused spirit. This meant that the word of the afflicted, who claimed to see the specter of a person harming them, was accepted as fact, regardless of whether the accused was physically present. This utterly subjective and unverifiable form of evidence completely undermined any semblance of a fair trial, as the accused had no way to defend against an invisible attacker. Confessions, even if coerced through torture, starvation, or psychological torment, were often welcomed by the court as proof of the devil's work and a path to salvation. Those who confessed were generally spared execution, given the chance to repent, which created a perverse incentive for the innocent to lie. This desperate gamble for survival, however, only further fueled the hysteria, as each confession validated the court's actions and reinforced the belief in a vast, demonic conspiracy. On June 2, 1692, the court convened for its first full trial, with Bridget Bishop as the accused, setting a grim precedent for the proceedings to follow. Numerous testimonies, both spectral and circumstantial, were leveled against her, from accusations of bewitching farm animals to causing children's deaths. Bishop vehemently denied the charges, but her spirited defense and nonconformist reputation only seemed to harden the court's resolve against her, ensuring her swift and tragic condemnation. A shocking piece of evidence against Bishop came from the discovery of pins in the walls of her old house, interpreted as tools for witchcraft, used to torment her victims. This mundane finding, warped by the pervasive fear, became irrefutable proof of her malevolence. Such flimsy and easily manipulated evidence demonstrated the court's desperate need to find tangible proof, even if it meant distorting innocent objects into instruments of evil. The jury quickly returned a guilty verdict, swayed by the overwhelming, albeit subjective, evidence and the dramatic performances of the afflicted. Bridget Bishop was condemned to death, a grim pronouncement that echoed through the terrified assembly, signaling a terrifying new phase in the Salem hysteria. This initial conviction solidified the court's path, validating the girl's accusations and accelerating the march towards further executions, all based on a dangerous blend of fear and manipulated testimony. On June 10, 1692, Bridget Bishop was led to Gallows Hill, a bleak rise outside Salem town, becoming the first person to be executed for witchcraft in the colony. The procession was a somber spectacle, a chilling warning to anyone who might dare to defy the court or the accusers. Her defiant spirit remained unbroken even at the gallows, a poignant testament to her refusal to confess to crimes she did not commit, standing as a lone beacon of courage against an unstoppable tide of terror. Her execution sent a shiver of fear through the entire colony, confirming that the courts were serious and that no one was safe. The sight of her lifeless body swaying in the wind was a stark, brutal reminder of the consequences of accusation, silencing dissent and further empowering the accusers. This public display of power and death cemented the grim reality of the witch hunt, extinguishing hope and intensifying the reign of terror. The accusations continued to spread rapidly beyond Salem village, reaching towns like Andover, Topsfield, and Ipswich, ensnaring dozens more in the widening net of paranoia. The initial trickle of accusations became a flood, overwhelming the legal system and plunging entire regions into chaos. This uncontrollable escalation demonstrated how easily fear, once unleashed, could devour reason and turn entire communities into executioners. By July, 5 more innocent people were condemned and executed: Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, and Sarah Wilds. Each hanging was a public spectacle, designed to instill fear and reinforce the magistrates' authority, yet each also deepened the collective trauma of the community. The systematic extermination of these individuals, based on flimsy evidence and mass hysteria, was a stark illustration of human cruelty unleashed under the guise of divine justice. Sarah Good, despite her pleas of innocence and the presence of her young child, was among those hanged. When Reverend Nicholas Noyes urged her to confess, she retorted defiantly, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." Her final words were a chilling prophecy, a desperate curse against her accusers that underscored the profound injustice of her death and the relentless cruelty of the witch hunt. Rebecca Nurse, beloved and respected, was initially acquitted by the jury, a brief moment of hope that rationality might prevail over hysteria. However, the afflicted girls immediately erupted in a renewed frenzy of fits, and Chief Justice Stoughton, dissatisfied with the verdict, pressured the jury to reconsider. This shocking judicial overreach demonstrated the court's relentless determination to secure convictions, sacrificing justice for the sake of maintaining the narrative of pervasive witchcraft and silencing any dissenting voices. The jury, succumbing to pressure and the renewed theatrics, reversed their decision, condemning Rebecca Nurse to death. This agonizing reversal shattered any illusions of impartiality in the court, proving that even the most virtuous could not escape the clutches of the witch hunt. Her unjust execution, despite her community's fervent support, became a tragic symbol of the legal system's complete collapse under the weight of fear and irrationality. Another prominent figure accused was Reverend George Burroughs, a former minister of Salem Village, whose past conflicts with the Parris family and his independent demeanor made him a target. Accused of extraordinary feats of strength, like lifting a heavy gun with one finger, which was twisted into evidence of supernatural power, Burroughs found himself caught in the crosshairs of the hysteria. His education and respected position did not protect him. Instead, they made him a more potent symbol for the accusers to conquer, demonstrating that no one, regardless of status, was immune. On August 19, 1692, Burroughs and 4 others, Martha Corey, John Willard, George Jacobs Sr., and John Proctor, were led to Gallows Hill. This mass execution marked a horrifying escalation, demonstrating the court's merciless efficiency in condemning multiple lives simultaneously. The sheer number of victims on this day underscored the terrifying speed and brutality with which the trials were proceeding, leaving the community reeling under a continuous wave of death and despair. At the gallows, Reverend Burroughs recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly, an act believed to be impossible for a witch, momentarily stunning the crowd. This powerful demonstration of faith caused a ripple of doubt among the onlookers, who questioned if such a pious man could truly be in league with the devil. However, Cotton Mather, a prominent minister and staunch supporter of the trials, quickly intervened, reminding the crowd that the devil could assume any form, even that of an angel of light, thus quashing the nascent hope for reason. Mather's swift theological intervention ensured the crowd's fears were quickly rekindled, and the executions proceeded without further interruption. This incident highlighted the immense power of religious authority in shaping public opinion and suppressing any emerging skepticism. The carefully constructed narrative of satanic conspiracy was too deeply ingrained to be easily challenged, even by a seemingly miraculous display of faith, as the fear of the devil outweighed logic and compassion. Martha Corey, ever the skeptic, refused to confess and bravely faced her unjust fate alongside her husband, Giles. Her initial doubts about the girl's credibility had made her a prime target, and her unwavering refusal to admit guilt became a testament to her integrity in the face of insurmountable pressure. Her execution was a brutal warning to anyone who dared to question the legitimacy of the trials, turning her bravery into a chilling example of the regime's unyielding power. John Proctor, a prosperous farmer and tavern keeper, was also hanged on this day, having spoken out fiercely against the validity of the spectral evidence and the accusers. His powerful voice of dissent, once a beacon of reason, was silenced by the very system he sought to expose as corrupt. Proctor's tragic fate demonstrated that even wealth and social standing offered no protection against the insatiable maw of the witch hunt, especially for those who dared to challenge its foundations. The September executions claimed 8 more lives, including Mary Easty, Alice Parker, Ann Pudita, Wilmot Redd, Margaret Scott, Samuel Wardwell, Mary Parker, and Abigail Faulkner. The grim tally grew almost weekly, each hanging cementing the horrifying reality that Salem was trapped in a relentless cycle of accusation and death. This escalating body count painted a brutal picture of a community consumed by irrational fear, relentlessly sacrificing its own citizens on the altar of a baseless moral panic. One of the most horrifying and unique deaths was that of Giles Corey, Martha's 80-year-old husband, who refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. He understood that pleading would submit him to a trial based on spectral evidence, a trial he knew would inevitably lead to a false conviction. His decision was an act of profound defiance, a desperate attempt to protect his estate from confiscation and to protest the fundamentally flawed legal system. To force a plea, Corey was subjected to peine forte et dure, a brutal form of torture where heavy stones were placed upon his chest, gradually crushing him. For 2 agonizing days, he endured this unimaginable torment, his spirit unbroken, repeatedly demanding more weight with his dying breath. This unspeakable cruelty underscored the barbarity of the legal system, showcasing its willingness to inflict agonizing death upon those who dared to defy its twisted authority. Corey's agonizing death was a horrifying testament to his unwavering courage and a chilling indictment of the court's depravity, which resorted to such barbaric measures to enforce its will. He died a hero, preserving his property for his heirs and making a profound, albeit silent, statement against the injustice of the trials. His final, defiant act remains one of the most brutal and memorable events of the Salem Witch Trials, a stark symbol of resistance against tyranny. The unchecked power of the afflicted girls began to reach absurd and dangerous levels as their accusations extended to increasingly prominent and powerful individuals. They accused ministers, magistrates, and even the wife of Governor Phipps himself, threatening to destabilize the very fabric of colonial society. This escalation, targeting those at the pinnacle of power, ultimately proved to be the turning point, as the court's credibility began to fray under the weight of such audacious claims. Prominent ministers, including Increase Mather, Cotton Mather's father, began to voice their grave concerns regarding the reliance on spectral evidence. They argued that spectral evidence was unreliable and easily manipulated by the devil, urging the court to exercise extreme caution and demand tangible proof. This crucial shift in religious opinion, challenging the very foundation of the trials, marked the beginning of the end for the witch hunt, injecting a much-needed dose of rationality into the pervasive madness. Increase Mather's influential treatise, Cases of Conscience Concerning Evil Spirits, became a pivotal document, advocating for stricter evidentiary standards and caution against hastily accepting spectral testimony. His arguments provided a powerful intellectual and theological framework for doubting the legitimacy of the trials, emboldening others to question the rampant injustice. This courageous stand by a respected theologian gradually eroded the moral authority of the court and helped turn the tide of public opinion. Alarmed by the escalating accusations and the growing dissent, Governor Phipps, whose own wife had been indirectly implicated, finally intervened. He ordered a halt to all further arrests and executions, effectively freezing the witch hunt in its tracks. This courageous executive decision was the critical turning point, pulling Salem back from the brink of utter self-destruction and halting the senseless bloodshed that had plagued the colony for months. In October 1692, Governor Phipps formally dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer, replacing it with a new superior court of judicature. This new court was instructed to disallow spectral evidence, demanding concrete, verifiable proof of witchcraft. The official rejection of spectral testimony was a monumental victory for justice, finally bringing an end to the reign of irrational fear that had condemned so many innocent lives. When the new court convened in January 1693, many of the remaining accused were brought to trial, but without spectral evidence, most were acquitted. Judge Stoughton, however, still clung to his unwavering belief in the devil's work and ordered the rearrest of those acquitted, a shocking display of his continued zealotry. This final attempt to perpetuate the witch hunt was quickly overridden by Governor Phipps, who issued pardons for all those still imprisoned, officially bringing the trials to a definitive end and liberating the innocent. In total, 19 individuals were hanged on Gallows Hill, one was pressed to death, and several more died in prison, all victims of the terrifying mass hysteria. The final death toll was a brutal testament to the destructive power of fear and unchecked authority, leaving an indelible stain on the history of colonial America. Each life lost represented a profound injustice, a chilling reminder of how easily a community can turn on itself when gripped by irrational terror. The immediate aftermath of the trials left Salem and the surrounding communities deeply scarred, grappling with immense guilt, grief, and the bitter divisions forged during the hysteria. Families were torn apart, reputations were destroyed, and the collective trauma lingered for generations. The air itself seemed heavy with unspoken accusations and profound regret, as the scale of the injustice slowly began to sink in, leaving a profound sense of communal shame. In 1697, 5 years after the first accusations, the General Court of Massachusetts declared a day of fasting and repentance, acknowledging the errors of the trials. Judge Samuel Sewall, one of the magistrates, publicly confessed his guilt and expressed profound remorse for his role, a rare act of public contrition. His courageous confession marked an important step towards healing, offering a glimmer of hope that the community could begin to confront its past and seek forgiveness for its devastating mistakes. The surviving victims and their families gradually sought redress, though justice was slow and incomplete. In 1711, the colony officially reversed the attainders for most of the accused, clearing their names and granting financial compensation to some of the families. While no amount of money could truly heal the wounds, this formal acknowledgement of their innocence was a crucial step towards restoring their honor. It was a long, arduous process, highlighting the lasting impact of such profound injustice and the slow, painful path towards reconciliation. The Salem Witch Trials stand as a chilling historical lesson on the dangers of religious extremism, mass hysteria, and the erosion of due process. They remind us how easily fear can be weaponized, turning communities against themselves and trampling individual rights under the guise of collective salvation. This brutal chapter in American history serves as a perpetual warning against the seductive power of paranoia and the devastating consequences of unchecked power and credulity. The legacy of Salem continues to resonate today, a stark reminder of the fragile balance between belief and reason, community and individuality. It challenges us to remain vigilant against the forces of intolerance, to question authority, and to champion justice, even when confronted by overwhelming societal pressures. The ghosts of Salem whisper a timeless warning. The greatest threats often lie not in the unseen, but in the depths of human fear and the willingness to sacrifice truth for the comfort of conformity.